Matters. So I'm super excited for today's episode because it's with another teen podcaster, Brandon Cheng. Brandon is one of the hosts at From a Teen's Perspective, an outlet for teens to talk about their passions, what interests them, hoping to inspire all the teens who listen. What's super cool for me is that Brandon and From a Teen's Perspective are Chicago-based, just like me. We're going to talk about our passion for podcasting, some of the tools, some of the challenges, and also our successes, and basically everything in between. I hope you guys enjoy the interview.
Hi guys, my name is Brandon. I'm with the From a Teen's Perspective podcast.
Hi, I'm Krithi, and I'm from the WhyFI Matters podcast, and we're super excited to do this crossover episode today. So, I guess how did you get into podcasting?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I've listened to podcasts for a while now, and I'm super interested to see if that's the same with you. But I've listened to a bunch of podcasts before, and I have a wide range of podcast like interests.
Yeah.
And I always thought it would be cool to sort of expand on those interests and in a sort of way make my own podcast. So put my own content out there. And that's kind of how I got into it. And at first, so I'm on my school student government, and I sort of proposed this idea of like a school-wide podcast. And I was asking if any of the other school members were interested. And Andre Nandi, who co-runs the podcast with me, he usually hosts, but right now, we're separated. So I'm doing most of the hosting. He and I decided to just start it and not just make it a school-wide podcast, but sort of a podcast for all teens from anywhere. So it's been a super fun process so far. How about you? How did you get into podcasting?
Yeah, so like you, I've always loved listening to podcasts whenever I'm on a long ride, road trips. I love listening. My favorite ones are like How I Built This. It's an NPR one. I love all the NPR podcasts. And then I'm a big Harry Potter fan, so there's one called like Harry Potter and the Sacred Text. It's pretty interesting. So those are some of my favorite podcasts. So I've always loved them. So when I had this idea to start WhyFI Matters, I like asked myself what would be the best way to like get content out there, and what's the best way to get information across to teens. And you could like read, you could watch, or you could listen. And so out of the three of those methods, I found listening is more accessible because you can multitask, and teens can do it when they're running, when they're doing the dishes, when they're going to school. So it's very versatile, and I thought it was the best way. Also, teens, we don't have a very long attention span, right? So it's hard to read these long articles. And that's why I thought podcasting was, pretty cool. So yeah.
Yeah, I love what you said about how you think like teens, listen to content, because like those ways that you listed, that's exactly how I listen to my podcast. Like when I go for my runs or when I'm taking the train to school, that's what I do. I just listen to podcasts. Like a lot of teens listen to music, and sometimes I do that too, but I really find podcasts and like the input that I get during those longer, like when I don't have anything active to do, I really love that, just putting on a podcast and listening to it. And I love that you said you like How I Built This, because that's also one of my favorite.
I love it so much. It's definitely got me inspired to start a podcast. So yeah. Also, one thing that I found interesting, like blogging, like in the past, blogging was like like everybody did it. And so like there's a lot of blogs right now. Even WhyFI Matters, we have like a blog part. But podcasting is like, it's really in right now. And I like this whole like shift from reading to listening is pretty cool to me, and something that I kind of wanted to be a part of. So yeah. So how did you choose to just talk about like teens' perspectives?
Yeah, that's an interesting question, because like I said before, I have tons of interests. So a couple of my favorite podcasts, I mean, I'm a cellist, so I listen to like Bulletproof Musicians. So that's a podcast for music players. And it's just like, what do I choose to talk about? And I felt like it would be hard for myself to pigeonhole myself into like one area.
Okay.
And so I really found it best to just talk to a bunch of interesting teens and whatever they did, to get like a wide range of stories and ideas.
Yeah, that's interesting, because for me, I'm like the opposite. I've really dived deep into discussing financial literacy. And I don't think I was always like this. personally, finances of like anything related to money, like all I wanted to do was spend money. I didn't want to learn about it. But I started realizing like over the past year that it's pretty integral to our society. And like when I did try learning about it, all the content out there was boring, like I said, and it's made by, older people who are like financial like experts. They're using like long words and it's just really confusing. It's not, and if it is targeted for teens, it's like I said, extremely boring. So I decided to like educate myself and other teens by creating content that's fun but relatable to us and it's trendy and engaging, because that's the best way we learn, right? And also another a misconception I realized, like I thought like finances was only for, I guess, like Wall Street people, or it relates to everybody. Like you can't discriminate, like regardless of what you do, if you're an artist, an athlete, I don't know, like lawyer, and if you're in healthcare, you need to be financially savvy, so it's crucial. So that's why I think I decided to talk about financial literacy and financial independence. So yeah.
Yeah, that's super cool. And I love that you mentioned that, because especially now, I mean, it really stinks if you didn't have a lot of savings built up. I mean, now is during this crazy time, it's like the worst thing to not have some money in reserve. And I think that's why financial literacy, I mean, it's best to start young. It's best to, have that solid base. And that's why I love what your podcast is doing, sort of educating fellow teens about how financial independence works.
Yeah, thank you. And I love what you guys are doing, because I feel like there's not much stuff out there that lets teens actually speak their voices and to actually hear what they have to say. And it's just a chance for them to share all these unique stories and different backgrounds. And it's pretty cool. And you get like for me, when I'm listening, I can start to like, I feel like I'm thinking outside of myself, like putting myself in another person's shoes, which is important for all of us to do every now and then. So yeah.
For sure, right.
So what was your process for getting started?
Yeah, that's one of the trickier steps, of course. Like having the idea is great, but then actually getting started is pretty tricky. So, sometimes when we plan stuff, we tend to get too much into the planning and not enough of the doing. So early on, Andre and I, we spent like a month, like just sort of thinking about what kind of direction we wanted and getting our platform set up. Yeah. And then after that, we just tried to get into it, like tried to get guests and then try to learn throughout the way. So the way that we did it at first was we just reached out to some of our friends who were doing some really cool things to see if they were interested in it. Everyone was so gracious with their time and like, yeah, of course we'll do this interview. And so it was just a matter of getting our like Gmail set up and getting our SoundCloud set up. And after that, it was just finding people to interview. And so that's we've learned a lot on the way, but that's just how we started. What about you for WhyFI Matters?
Yeah, for me, because like I'm creating all this content, I had to do a lot of research because I didn't know anything about finances or anything before. So a lot of research was put in, and obviously like everything you said, like the platform, and obviously like editing and finding what podcast host to use and what platforms do I want to be on. So a lot of research into that, like even what microphone to use. So like simple stuff like that, but it definitely like a lot of that research went in. I'd say it like from the idea, like when I had the idea, it took me about 2 or 2.5 months before I put out the episodes, because I put out 3 episodes on the release date. So yeah, it definitely was a lot of research, but I've learned so much doing it, which is great. So yeah.
We did the exact same thing. We dropped 3 episodes on our first release. So I think that's funny that it's a little different, like with our 2 different styles of like one's more in depth and one's more broad, but so many of our steps and processes are the same.
Yeah, I think that's interesting. Yeah. What platforms are you on?
So recently we've expanded to, well, not recently, like a couple months ago, we went onto Apple Podcasts and Spotify Podcasts. So that's been really cool. Yeah. And we use SoundCloud when we first started, and that was definitely a good site to host, and also helps us with getting us ported onto Apple and Spotify. And recently we've been thinking about creating more of like a YouTube channel featuring like small interviews.
Yeah.
And so I know you're nodding your head. You're probably trying to explore the same things.
No, yeah. So, well, I haven't gone on SoundCloud, but I'm on like I put a lot of my stuff on my hub, which is like my webpage. So it's at WhyFiMatters.com. So you can access all the content from there, and I do a video section for the podcast. So I do the YouTube thing, and it's pretty hard like converting audio to video, but I think it's pretty cool to have it on YouTube. You know, you can access and you can connect with people better through like the comments and stuff. So I definitely suggest to do YouTube. And then also I'm on like Spotify and Apple Podcasts. So yeah, I'm on similar sites as you. So what challenges have I guess you faced in the past, and what are you facing now?
Yeah, so at first it was because I'm working with Andre a lot on our projects. It's like we have two different like areas of strength. Like I'm more interested in the actual interviews part, and he's like really good with the tech. So it was good like to get his input with all the tech stuff, because I tend to have issues setting up my microphone and things like that. So I'm glad he was here along the way for that. And finding people to interview hasn't been that hard, so that's been good. But I would say our biggest constant challenge is just always trying to increase our listener count.
Yeah.
And so we've been trying to experiment with more conversational style in our interviews. So that's something that we're always working on. I'm not always the most natural host, so that's something that I've been trying to sort of build my skills on, but trying to find more conversational episodes or inviting cool and awesome guests to talk about things. And that's sort of what we're doing to address like our viewership numbers. What about you guys?
Yeah, well, it was interesting what you said about like it's not natural to be a podcast host, because I found the same thing. Like it's a skill that not many teens are doing. Like you're interviewing, you're talking to like, well, for me, it's a lot of people I don't know, or you're talking to people you may know, but you don't know much about them. You know, you're asking them all these and like different questions. And I found it like even now it's like really, it's a skill, and it's like I'm still learning every time. I'm learning from the mistakes and everything. So yeah, I liked what you said for that. I guess one of my past challenges, it's just really overwhelming, like doing, like when I listen to other podcasts, I'm like, oh, it sounds so easy, but like the behind the scenes, it's just crazy, right? Like finding people like you. Well, for me, it's hard to find people. It's, but like also like doing all the research, and it's just a lot of work. And then editing, just takes such a long time, but these are skills I guess I'm developing, so that's pretty cool. And I guess more recently, similar to you, I'd say promoting it on social media is what I've been like putting a lot of my effort on, and I really see like the impact like having it on Instagram or whatever it has on your podcast, right? So I'm definitely focusing a lot on the social media aspect of it, because that will also, like you're saying, like increase listener count and increase engagement with the podcast. So yeah.
For sure. And I think if I remember correctly, you're a one-woman show, right? You're just running all the applications. So at FTP, we have Andre and I, we're usually co-hosts, and we're sort of founding it. And because we're both juniors at this point,
Okay.
We're trying to think about like who's going to take it over when we sort of graduate. And so now we also have Savi. She's our social.
I know Savi. Yeah.
No, Savi?
Yeah, I play guitar with her, and she goes to
look
some
at that.
guitar school. So yeah.
Well, Savi's been our amazing social media guru, because I'm also not too good with social media. So we have a whole team sort of operating on it, and it's so impressive what you're doing just sort of by yourself, running all the things behind the scenes and all the interview stuff. So that's been super impressive.
Yeah, thank you. What's your favorite episode of your podcast?
Oh, there's so many good to choose from, and they're all about so many different topics that it's hard to pick just one. But I mean, every new episode is sort of my favorite. Like we just had one with DJ Stewart. He's a basketball commit, first ranked prospect in Illinois. So that was a super amazing top episode. And he's the first athlete that we've had on. Other podcasts I've really enjoyed. We had the National Spelling Bee winner from 2018, Erin Howard. She lives in Alabama. That was a super fun interview, and we had her spell some questions at the end, and that was fun. What about you?
Well, since I do both like solo and interview, I'd say for solo podcasts, it's called like the advertising cult, because I learned a lot about consumerism in America and like the advertising barrage they have, and which is really insightful. And then I did one about like Harry Potter and what you can learn from finances from Harry Potter, which was fun because I spoke in a British accent for that, which was pretty out of my comfort zone, but it was just fun doing. And then interview, I interviewed this girl from Australia. Her name's Izzy, and she's the founder of Love Your Skin, and that was really fun. So yeah.
Amazing, yeah. For the Harry Potter one, I'm interested in knowing, did you talk about if Harry Potter was too reckless with his spending?
No, I took like financial lessons we could learn from Harry Potter. Like I guess for Harry Potter, like for his parents, they put all this money in his vault, and like the value of compound interest and how it accumulated over the years. That was one of the lessons. But yeah, it was pretty fun to do. And speaking in a British accent, that was putting myself out there. But yeah, it was fun.
Yeah, that's super cool. If anyone is interested in Harry Potter and in financial independence, I mean, you have to go check out that episode. That's probably fantastic.
Yeah. So what are some future goals for your podcast?
Yeah, future goals. For sure, the number one short-term one is getting that YouTube channel started. Right now, I'm going through the old episodes, seeing which clips, or like just really talking with my team about what clips should go up and like how that should work out.
Okay.
And then in the future, we still want to continue increasing our viewership numbers. And also we're super excited. I don't know if I should drop this yet, but whatever, I'll just go for it. So student government. So basically we're doing so our podcast is like for all teens, around the world.
Yeah.
And like interesting interview topics with them. And so with our school, we're trying to do like more short, small, fun interviews and conversations with just anyone
cool.
from our school. So we're going to be sort of adding that in as sort of like a branch of our podcast. So that's something that we're going to work on next year, hopefully when we're back in physical school.
Yeah. That's interesting. I love how your school is like supporting you through this. It's really great, the community you have, I can see. I guess for me, some of the goals, I want to get more international guests, especially teens, because right now I have a lot of like financial experts or other adult podcasters speaking, and I want more teens who are entrepreneurs on it because we can relate to them. And then I've sort of expanded my podcast from just being podcasts to the blogs and infographics and the voices section where teens from around the world sort of contribute their perspective on money. And then also, like this is way into the future, but I want to like partner with some not-for-profit to help like underprivileged kids, especially girls, to have access to financial literacy, because I want it to be a global platform, but not everybody has access to this technology and stuff. So partnering with one of them would be amazing in the future. So yeah.
Sounds super amazing. And actually, I kind of want to ask you a few questions about just your podcast, because I know there's so many interesting things that you're doing that's not just podcasting. So like, for example, on your website, you say money is an integral part of society. Yeah. How and when did you realize this? Like, is it when you were 5 or more in high school, or how did that work?
No. I'd say in the past year, I definitely realized this because, so I guess last year, I wrote this research paper on the gender pay gap for school. That was my first, I guess, sort of step into the real world of finances. And then recently, because I started all the thoughts to make this WhyFI Matters happen in the past couple months. So that's when COVID-19 erupted, right? And so it definitely magnified the role that money plays in our society. People are losing jobs, businesses, small and large, are becoming like unhinged and are struggling, and countries are becoming unhinged. And the global economy, it collapsed, right? So it just really dawned on me that like good economic stability is the core it's a backbone of a functioning society. And on a personal note, my parents have definitely started involving me more on like day-to-day financial making decisions. And I saw there's a lot of gaps in my knowledge on personal finance. So I sort of have come to believe, I guess, that understanding how I deal with my money in my personal life, that's like personal finance, but also how I deal with money in my community, like supporting small businesses, or in the world, like I was talking about ethical marketing and conscious consumerism, like how so it's just, I guess, all of these ideas sort of came upon, and that's how, like, money is just a core part of our society. So yeah.
Yeah, and I'm interested in kind of what do you do right now? You said your parents sort of have made you more part of like the personal financial decision making.
Mhm.
What sort of things are you in charge of now more than before?
I wouldn't say I'm like in charge of them, but like, I think it's this, I think can be said for a lot of families. A lot of like financial discussions are talked behind closed doors, right? And I think it's important, like they've started becoming more open, talking about everything. Also like keeping me informed with everything that's going on with the economy, their jobs, everybody, our family, our friends, just like knowing more and not being stuck in the shadows. Also, we recently moved houses, so I was also a they definitely involved me in that whole process. So I definitely like opened my eyes to finances. So yeah.
Awesome. So I know you've mentioned sort of the conversations that you've had with your family and also the research paper that you did for school,
Mm-hmm.
but it doesn't seem like, and from my personal experience, it doesn't seem like financial literacy is something that's really talked about in school or as much
Yeah.
as it should have. So what are your thoughts about the changes that are necessary to financial education in schools?
Yeah, definitely. I love that observation. Well, like my school, I know, like they kind of cover it, and a lot of schools, they might talk about it, but like having an actual course where, so having it actually part of the curriculum is definitely something that should change. And also making it more relatable to teens. Like, why would you talk about taxes when half the kids aren't making money or something like that? Making it more relatable to teens is definitely one thing. And then also taking a big picture approach, because I feel like when you talk about financial literacy, you immediately talk about personal finance, but it's not all that. It's like teaching them about their role as consumers in society and understanding, like I was talking about before, like these advertisements and how they target you, and understanding your place in society is a big thing, because it will definitely help them better their finances and understanding of the world of money, but also like help them become, I guess, like you could say, citizens of the world or something. So taking a big picture approach is one thing that should change as well.
Yeah, and I think that's a great way to put it. Like, and especially your comment that it seems like we're too worried about just only the personal finances
Yeah,
part, but we're not observing enough like how the financial system works in general, or
yeah,
how like the economy was
definitely. Yeah.
booming. So I think that's a really interesting point to make. And I'm
Mhm.
wondering your thoughts about this. Would it help if so recently College Board made their AP Computer Science Principles course,
Okay.
which it reminds me a lot of a class, or it makes me think that they made the course to try to get more people interested in computer science, because
Oh,
if there's AP classes for it, people
okay.
might be more interested in taking that class.
Mhm.
So I think it would be helpful if College Board created an AP curriculum or course designed around personal
That
finances.
that would be pretty interesting. I never thought about that. Yeah, like not just personal finances, just like finances, an AP course. That would be amazing. Um, yeah, that's pretty cool. I don't know how to get started on that, but something that I think we should start thinking about. So yeah, yeah, like I was saying, I guess we as teens place value on AP courses, or if it's pass, or like if you're gonna fail, like we better start studying and better start learning the material. And um, I guess that's how society works. So definitely placing some sort of like goal for us in terms of finances, and learning about them is something that definitely should start happening. So yeah.
Great. And there's another thing about your podcast that I found super interesting. Well, you're not really just a podcast, of course. You have your blog and your collaborations. And those collaborations sound so cool. So you've mentioned a couple of collabs or future collabs with like Girls Play Global or Cliche Teen or Melodies for Math.
Yeah.
So how did you get in touch with those organizations, and what do those collabs sort of look like?
Yeah, so a lot of it is through Instagram and like DMing them and connecting with them, like connecting with other youth organizations through Instagram. There's like all this whole like community of these young and youth organizations that I didn't know about before, but it's really empowering and cool. From Melodies for Math, they basically, what they do is like they make music to learn like hard math topics like calculus or whatever. It's pretty interesting. And so we're like going to partner, like she's going to start making music to learn personal finances for that course, which would be pretty interesting and fun for teens, I guess. And like, I guess for Girls Play Global, I love their mission so much because they're like helping underprivileged girls in India have access to playing soccer, because if they play soccer, it will also most likely help them stay in school for longer, which is really important. So I love what they're doing, and just supporting each other is, when they post, like helping people know about it. Definitely the support is, it's key. So we just promote each other's posts and spread the word. So yeah. And,
yeah, that's really cool.
Yeah.
Doing collaborate with other youth organizations, and I think that's so important. And you kind of reach out to us over Instagram too, and we really appreciate just that collaborative spirit. I think that's exactly what the world needs, even before this started and even more now. So that's just super cool.
Yeah, definitely. And so I want to now talk about From a Teen's Perspective. It's such an amazing initiative, podcast you have going on. So like I was saying before, you have such a wide, like you were saying, you have such a wide variety of like teens with different perspectives on your podcast. So what have you personally learned from discussing and conversing with them?
Yeah, I think I've learned one of the best things that I've learned, not from one guest, but just from so many, is that a lot of the guests that we have on say similar things in sort of different contexts. So what I mean is, like, all of them have this approach that, or most of them have this approach that if you want to do something, you should just go do it. And I think that's a message that's been sort of presented to me multiple times by people who are like, we had this, she's an immigrant from Romania, and she sort of talked about that. Yeah, with Andrea, and that was a super fun episode. Mm-hmm. And she sort of talked about that spirit, but also the same way with the founders or the president of the Junior Economic Club. Oh. So all this super cool, totally different topics, but they sort of all hit on the same idea that if you really want something, you should go do it. And that's one of my biggest takeaways from the podcast.
Yeah, I was interested, like, you're providing this platform for teens to voice their ideas and, I guess, stories and opinions. So have you noticed any more like common traits among these teens?
Yeah, some common traits. So I think, like I mentioned before, the go get it attitude, I think that's one of them that's been super cool. Also, there's a sense that of like balancing because a lot of our guests do a lot of amazing projects. Yeah. So I'm hearing a lot about how they balance those super like time consuming tasks and how they manage to keep themselves like going mentally, because it's a lot to do a lot of things at once, but how a lot of these guests are able to handle that. Mm-hmm. And some of the individual guests have shared, like, specifically in their field, some of the things that they are interested in. So I think some other common things, I guess, to sort of mention, a lot of people have a little funny thing, I guess, is that a lot of people have talked about emailing. I think both Helena from Bye Bye Plastic Bags, North Carolina, and Nina from the Junior Economic Club, and I'm sure some other guests have talked about like emailing other organizations, and the rule they have is to keep emailing until they tell you to not email back, more or less. So I think that's been something cool that I've seen across a couple of podcast guests.
Yeah, like like, I guess similar to the go get it mindset, just keep doing what you're doing, even if you get rejections. That's amazing. And so how do you how do you find how do you find these interesting teams, and how do you connect with your guests on your podcast?
Yeah, so a lot of the guests that we have are people, at least the earlier guests were people that we knew
Okay.
personally, like Andre and I know. And recently we've been trying to branch out and find other teams, sort of like you're doing with like international.
Mm-hmm.
We haven't found anyone we haven't talked to anyone internationally yet,
Mm-hmm.
but we have talked to a lot of people from around the country who've been doing some cool things. So like
Yeah.
the spelling bee winner was from Alabama, or America's Top Young Scientist was from
Mm-hmm.
Oregon, I think. And I think it's just a matter of sort of reading the news sometimes, seeing like New York Times has this feature, Teens in the Times or something like that. And then just reading those articles and seeing, wow, that person looks super cool, super interesting. Can we get into contact sometimes? And to get into contact is kind of, you have to email their school sometimes, or like how you actually do it. You have to do some sleuthing for some like email addresses, but it's been super fun to sort of connect with various guests.
Yeah, I love that. And so I'm only starting, I guess, on my podcasting journey. You've been doing this for a year now, or?
Yeah, about a year and 2 months now, I guess.
Great.
It's been a great journey.
Yeah, and so how do you like build your community?
Yeah, building our community so really we try to push a lot on sort of our personal socials, and recently we have Instagram and other social medias that we try to sort of promote our our From a Teen's Perspective podcast on. And also just sort of talking to people who have similar interests that are just learners. We think that the people who are really interested in our podcast are people who just love learning for the sake of learning, like learning from a wide variety of people. And so that's kind of what our base has been, trying to get into contact with people who might be interested in just hearing a wide variety of stories, and sort of offering ourselves as a way to sort of satisfy that want to hear more.
Okay, I see. And then I guess, how has your community helped you?
That's a great question. Yeah, so it's helped me, I think, because a lot of the times people reach out to me with some great ideas about things that I might not have, thought of as something that I want to talk about, but because people suggested that idea, I'm like, wow, that's a great idea. We should definitely go into that. And so, for example, I was on a train with a couple of my school friends, and one of them mentioned that they would like to see an episode about study skills, because that's so relevant for like teens. And so, it's just a matter of like hearing about what other people might be interested in hearing about, and be like, oh yeah, that's super interesting. A lot of people will find value in that. And I'm sure I'll learn something from that personally too. So they've been able to suggest some really awesome ideas. Actually, DJ Stewart was a listener suggestion.
Oh, cool.
They wanted to hear about DJing. So that's been amazing.
Yeah, I like how you're doing like listener suggestions, like I guess like giving what the audience wants, but also finding it, like making sure it's in line with what you want to do and your mission. I like that. And yeah, I just love everything you're doing, and I like listening to all these stories. So yeah, thank you so much for doing this crossover episode. Like for me personally, like I haven't found any other teens who have been podcasting. Like if I have to find them, I have to search really hard for it. And it's especially cool because we're both Chicago based, so that's amazing. So yeah, I love what you guys are doing.
Yeah, and same with you guys. I mean, I just heard about your podcast, but the episodes I've listened to so far have been just absolutely great. Like I listened to the one with the flipping episode, basically how to flip like various items and stuff, and that just got me thinking like about how people I know you had a whole section of the episode dedicated to it, but like how a lot of people I know sell sort of like Supreme gear and shoes and stuff.
Yeah.
So I thought that was super interesting to see those parallels mentioned in your awesome episodes.
Yeah, and I recently listened to your you had like 2 episodes on like the climate change education, and climate change action. Those 2 were very interesting, and I like how you're getting like activists, musicians, like a bunch of like variety of people. It just really expands your like my perspective. So yeah, I love what you guys are doing. keep doing it. So yeah.
Yeah, thanks so much again for initiating this conversation. It's been such a real enjoyment of mine to talk with someone as amazing as you with your podcast. And I'm sure this episode will be just amazing for both of our bases.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
So that's the end of the interview, and I love talking with Brandon, and his podcast is just so very inspiring to me. It was one of the first podcasts made by a teen that I came across. I hope this episode may have inspired you to create your own podcast or start an initiative or explore your passions. If you want to listen to From a Teen's Perspective, their SoundCloud will be in the show notes, and you can always access them on Spotify and Apple Podcasts too. Also, don't forget to listen to this week's Voices post by Aditi from Bangalore, India, and her take on the "it will do" attitude of Indian consumerism and how it differs from Western consumerism. If you want to stay up to date with all of WhyFI Matter's latest content, go follow us on Instagram at WhyFI Matters. And thank you for listening, and I can't wait to talk to you guys next time.